Hey guys, it's Danielle, and today we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read in March. So, to start off with some facts, in March I read a total of 6 books, and I read a total of 2,621 pages, which is pretty impressive for me. March was not my best month so far. I'm not entirely sure what was, but I've definitely read more than 6 books this year in a month. So yeah, I think the reason that March was a little slower for me was because I was actually taking time to read more books by indie authors, and I was also attempting to adjust to working from home and figuring out the balance of working from home and reading while working from home. You know, all that other stuff. But it was a pretty successful month, I would say. From the total of the 6 books, my average rating was 4.5 stars, so clearly I liked the books that I read this month, and that's absolutely true. I was pretty much overall impressed with all of them except one, so I'd say that was a pretty good reading month. So let's get into the books that I read this month. So the first book that I read this month was Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. And you probably could have guessed this if you've been following me on Bookstagram, if you've been following me on YouTube, wherever you're watching this, you've probably guessed that I love Cassandra Clare. If you haven't, now you know. I love Cassandra Clare. This book came out at the beginning of March and I devoured it. I devoured it. It was so good. It's like every time I read a Cassandra Clare book, she blows me away. I can't even begin to tell you how ridiculous it is that every time she writes a new book, it's my new favorite. How does she do that? How does she do that? If you don't know what Chain of Gold is the sequel series to the prequel series, The Infernal Devices. So if that's a little too hard for you to follow, The Infernal Devices, those characters, they're children. That's who it's about. It's about their children. It is fantastic. I can't really say much more to you without spoiling. However, Cassandra Clare does say that you can read Chain of Gold without reading any other Shadowhunter books. I disagree with that. I think that you can. I think she's explained the world well enough, but I think you'll be missing out on so much if you just dive right into Chain of Gold. So if you're thinking about picking Chain of Gold up, I would absolutely say read The Infernal Devices first. You won't regret it. The Infernal Devices is probably going to be one of your favorite series of all time, and then you'll enjoy Chain of Gold because it's some of her best writing yet. Absolutely some of her best writing yet. So Chain of Gold I gave 5 out of 5 stars, of course. Nothing less for my queen Cassie, but it was well deserved. It was absolutely well deserved. Such a fantastic book. So glad that it came out and I read it, and I really want to read it again. So maybe next month. The next book that I picked up this month is actually by my dear friend Mary Luciano, and that is Heirs of Fate. Heirs of Fate I gave 5 out of 5 stars, and not just because Amara is my friend. This book blew me away. Like, I figured she could write, but when I actually went and picked up this book, I was absolutely floored at how good it was. I said in my review for this book that I cannot believe it wasn't traditionally published by the time I read it. That's how good it was. If you've never heard of Heirs of Fate, now's the time to check it out. But Heirs of Fate is about 3 young women, 3 dark destinies, and 1 chance to change their fate. Now, if that doesn't sound enticing to you, it has to, because it's such a good one-liner. As I said, this book follows 3 young women, the Bride of Dreams, the Huntress and the Nightingale, and the Storm Mistress. My personal favorite was the Storm Mistress, but I'm telling you, every indie author should take note of Mary Luciano, because what she's doing is she is completely transforming what it means to be an indie author, and she is setting standards and raising the bar for everyone. So good. You absolutely have to check this book out. The next book that I read in March, the 3rd book, is actually A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. Now, this book has been out for a while, and it's been on my list for a long time, and I just never got to it. And that is awful. I really wish I would have read it sooner now that I've read it and I realize how good it was and how much I loved it. Yeah, so I tend to do this thing where I pick up a book in the series, 1 or 2 books, and then the next one comes out, a year later, and by the time it comes out I have forgotten everything, and then I put off reading it because I forgot everything and I'm afraid to pick it up, because what if I start reading it and none of it means anything to me anymore, and who are these characters and where am I and what's going on? yeah, that's how I felt about A Reaper at the Gates. So by the time that I started reading Reaper at the Gates, I was very pleased that Saba Tahir did a very good recap in the beginning that did not feel like info dumping, but was very well done. So if you don't know what A Reaper at the Gates is, as I said, it's the third book in an Ember in the Ashes series, and the next one's coming out soon. I'm not going to tell you about A Reaper at the Gates because I don't want to spoil anybody who hasn't read An Ember in the Ashes, but essentially An Ember in the Ashes follows Laia and Elias. Laia is a slave and Elias is a soldier, neither one is free. Essentially it is this very Game of Thrones-esque, very political, very fantastical story. It is one of the best series that I've read to date, and yeah, I absolutely adored A Reaper at the Gates. I also gave that book 5 out of 5 stars, and now I'm so ready for Ember 4. Like, I forgot what it was like to be in that world, and when I started reading A Reaper at the Gates, I was so pleasantly surprised and pulled back into that world, and I'm so glad that I read it, because I can't wait. I can't wait for Ember 4, but I'm sad that I have to wait, if that makes sense. Oh, and I keep calling it Ember 4, but it's actually got a title already. It's called A Sky Beyond the Storm, so yeah, that's book 4. Just ignore me. The next story that I read was Disenchanted by Brianna Sugalski. This book was everything that I needed. It was like Twilight meets The Kiss of Deception for me, and it was everything that I've been looking for. And I don't know how Brianna knew I needed it, but I needed it. So this story follows a cursed princess, a crestfallen killer, the town that wants them both to burn, and the witch that can save them. Now, how good does that sound? It involves royalty, which is one of my favorite things ever. It involves a forest, which is mysterious and intriguing and has all kinds of dark things inside of it, which I also love. And that's, of course, where our princess goes to venture. The story is filled with history, adventure, and romance. It's literally everything I needed, and I couldn't put it down. And when it ended, I needed more. I immediately needed more. I DM'd her right away. I was like, wait a minute. Where's book 2? But thankfully, book 2 is actually happening. She's working on book 2. So I'm very excited to continue reading about Lilac and Garen because I need more. For Disenchanted, I also give this book 5 out of 5 stars. It was everything I didn't know I needed. And I don't know, I just did not expect, I just did not expect that amount of quality. And I was so enamored by the world building, by the character development, by the story, by the history. So yeah, that book blew me away. 5 out of 5 stars for that one as well. The next book I read this month was Serpent and Dub by Shelby Mahurin, and this book was something that a lot of my friends hyped up to me. Like, Danielle, you have to read this, you have to read this, you need to read this next, read this now. And I finally got around to reading it this month, and I was so unimpressed, at least to start. When I first started, I was kind of like, okay, where's this going? And I felt like it almost kind of checked off too many boxes for me. Like, it was too perfect of a book. Like, it fit all of my favorite things, my criteria for all my favorite things, and I just felt like it was just too much for me, and it kind of just turned me off a little bit. As I went along with the book, I kind of felt like the story was dragging. I didn't really see the point. I didn't know where it was gonna go. It just seemed too long to have a purpose. And when I found out it had a sequel, I was even more confused. But it definitely picked up towards the end, and I'm very glad that I read it, because now I'm actually excited for the sequel, which is Blood and Honey, which is coming out very soon. So if you don't know anything about Serpent and Dub, essentially, and it's on theme with what I've been reading, essentially it is a story about Louise and a man named Reed. It is in a world where there is a war between witches and the church, and essentially Reed is a chasseur at the church and Louise is a witch, and she stumbles into his life, and in order to protect Reed's image, the two of them have to get married. And Reed doesn't know she's a witch, but things will definitely ensue. Things will happen. It's a good little ride. I would say that I enjoyed the ride. Would I recommend people moving it to the top of their TBRs? No. Would I recommend reading it? Yes. For me, I actually gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and the only reason it got a slightly higher rating was because the ending made it worth it to me. The whole ending actually uplifted everything else that I read, and I was like, you know what? All right, deserves another star. But it was very close to a 3-star read for me, had it not been for that ending. And the last book that I read this month was All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. Now this was actually for my book club book of the month over at my YA Allegiance book club, which we host every month. It was voted in and I was supremely disappointed with this book, and that seemed to be the consensus of everyone in book club. I actually gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I still think that's pretty generous. It was everything that I wanted to love and should have loved. I mean, it is blurbed by Tomi Adeyemi to begin, who wrote Children of Blood and Bone, so that's praise enough. But it was pirates, and it was magic, and the world building was so intriguing. It should have been good, but it wasn't. It absolutely fell flat in all the wrong places for me. Overall, I think that Adeline, as her debut book, the world building was beautiful. I loved the characters. I didn't like obsess over them, but they were done well enough. And I really loved how expansive everything was. However, it was almost too expansive. She built such a large world, and she went from place to place to place immediately. She didn't stay in one place for too long, which made it kind of confusing to picture the world. It felt like the plot was very simplistic, it was easily predictable, and overall everything felt very rushed, especially the end. I feel like this book could have been more than a duology. It could have been a trilogy had she not rushed the ending the way she did. But every time that she was dropping foreshadowing, I was like, oh, okay, I know what's gonna happen now, because it was too glaringly obvious. And I feel like in the same facet, the writing was a bit too simplistic for me. It fell short, and I think it's because I had such high expectations of it as well. I think that also ruined it a little bit for me. But yeah, I gave that book, as I said, 3 stars. It was a bit generous, but I'm still glad I read it. Will I read the sequel? Maybe. Will I rush to read the sequel? Absolutely not. But yeah. So that was all for the books that I read in March. I have pretty big plans for books to read in April. I've already read 2 books since the month started, which was 2 days ago. Wow, I've already read 2 books this month. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself for that. However, we'll see how many books I can get done this month. But yeah, I have not done one of these videos in so long. It's been so much fun. I used to love doing wrap-up videos, but I haven't actually filmed videos in the longest time because, first of all, I don't really have much space and I couldn't really figure out how to do it. But now that I've got the space, I've got the equipment, I have a tripod now, makes it a little bit easier to film videos, and I'm so excited to get back to it. I started on BookTube originally, and I did it for 1.5 years, 2 years, and I loved it so much, and I'm so excited to get back into it and to see if it's something that I still love. I think it is. It's so much fun to talk out all of my feelings on books, and it's also so much fun to kind of catalog them and to now have this as something I can look back to and reflect on when I'm thinking about what my reading life was like back then, or what my goals were, or how I felt about certain books. So it's always so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys are reading amazing books, and yeah, I'll see you in my next one. Bye guys.